Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth.
A local police lieutenant is out of a job after several officers accused her of creating a hostile work environment, drinking on the job, among other things. Channel 2's Taisha Fernandez has learned the city of South Fulton hired an outside police agency to investigate this.
The Smyrna Police Department took this on and interviewed nearly 30 employees with the South Fulton Police Department. In the end, they found that the main complaints were substantiated. There were several violations of department policy and maybe even some criminal violations. The allegations against then Lieutenant Shannon McKessie started late last year when 8 South Fulton police officers made 2 official complaints. More than half of them said on the record Lieutenant McKessie created a hostile work environment because she was, quote, terrible. 7 officers complained that McKessie would drink alcohol at work, forced others to do it with her, and claimed people are intimidated by McKessie because of her relationship with the chief and his wife. At least 1 officer complained that Lieutenant McKessie mishandled money from crime scenes. In a memo to city officials, when the HR director, Nikki Graham, tried to launch an investigation, Graham said Councilwoman Helen Willis tried to fire her. In that same memo, Graham said, it concerns me that Councilwoman Willis would ask to terminate me for doing my job. The city manager, Tammy Sadler-Jones, also sent a memo saying Willis accused the HR director of meddling in police business and that she needs to leave the city and go to another agency. That's when the city manager called for an outside police agency, Smyrna Police, to investigate. Smyrna investigators spoke to more than 20 South Fulton Police Department employees. I asked Police Chief Keith Meadows to sit down with me, but he declined an interview. I also requested an interview with Councilwoman Willis, but she never answered my request. However, Willis did say in a previous Facebook post, there's no merit to these allegations. But the Smyrna police investigation found the complaints from Sergeant Burkhart and Detective King for hostile work environment are substantiated. There were several substantiated violations of City of South Fulton policy, South Fulton Police Department policy, and Labor Act violations. There is a highly probable criminal violation of theft found in this investigation. All people in the polygraph were determined to be truthful except Lieutenant McKessie. McKessie denied all of these allegations, but according to the report, a week after Smyrna released its findings on July 5th, McKessie resigned on July 11th in lieu of termination. Many officers believe Chief Meadows should have fired her as soon as Smyrna's report came out.
What you've just seen is a news story from Monday about the city of South Fulton, Georgia. Now, the city of South Fulton is only 5 years old. It used to be a suburb of Atlanta, and its population is about 90% black, and the majority of its population is middle class. According to the census, over 67% of the city's population owns a home, and the average annual household income is almost $62,000. Basically, these were the black people who had good-paying jobs and wanted to escape the high cost of living, the lower quality schools, and high stress of life in Atlanta. Now, I would like to say that the entire concept behind starting their own city was to have city finances that served the citizens instead of every non-black interest in town, and that they wanted to have a government that was responsive to their needs. I'm sure there were a lot of people who hoped to have that, but that wasn't what spurred the creation of South Fulton. I'll explain that in a moment, but what the citizens of the newly incorporated South Fulton are finding out is that a lot of the political dysfunction, corruption, and ignorance that made them want to leave Atlanta followed them to their new city. It's like a microcosm of what happened with us after slavery. We left the plantations all right, but we took our traitors, bootlicks, bedwenches, and dusty dudes with us, and we've refused to weed them out. Meaningful black empowerment cannot happen until we do. Now, Fulton County is where Atlanta is, and for the last 20 years or so, there's been this rush of cityhood movements where a lot of these suburbs in the county have applied to become incorporated. Usually they're majority white, by the way. Incorporation means they vote to become their own city as opposed to being part of the county. Now, this is a growing trend of white capital flight, meant to make sure that the money that the cities and states give to white populations will stay in those enclaves and not in the larger cities where blacks are the majority. At this point, pretty much all of Fulton County is incorporated. South Fulton did not incorporate when a lot of the other cities had back in 2005. They had an older commissioner who they trusted, and he told them that it was a, quote, no-brainer that they would need to raise taxes a lot just to stay afloat, so they might as well go ahead and stay unincorporated. Go ahead and just remain part of the county. Well, of course, this guy would say that. He was a county commissioner. So the black residents in what would become South Fulton voted not to incorporate in 2006 when a lot of the other areas, that is, white areas, were incorporating. So when South Fulton finally got around to incorporating 5 years ago, they basically got what few remaining parts of the county were left over. Oh, and that commissioner who told them not to incorporate, his name is Bill Edwards. He became South Fulton's first mayor. And so the city of South Fulton, Georgia was born, population 108,000. Malcolm once said that independence is based on land. Now, land is just another way of saying resources, and when you look at the situation in South Fulton, that pretty much tells the entire story. While it is true that this 90% black enclave is middle class, and they've got nice homes, it's also true that the city gets most of their revenue from residential taxes, as opposed to business taxes. That tells the story right there. This is a city that's basically made up of well-to-do black employees. South Fulton is a bunch of neighborhoods, bunch of winding streets, but what you don't have is a central business district. Where's the commercial or financial district at? Where's the industrial area at? See, the cart got put before the horse because instead of South Fulton being the result of a carefully planned black business class who were ready and positioned to supply what they needed for themselves, it was instead the result of a city full of black employees who were basically scrambling to try to keep themselves from being swallowed up by some majority white enclave like the kind that were sprouting up all around them. It was a reactive move, not a proactive move. I'm not blaming them for it. I'm just simply saying this is part of a larger pattern. There's actually an interesting story about the city of South Fulton from Politico of all places, but this is the white media, so as you expect, while they mention that there's fighting amongst the mayor and the city council, they spend practically all the article talking about the mayor, mostly critical, trying to paint him out as some sort of wide-eyed radical. I don't know if they're necessarily right or wrong, but I know that they didn't devote as much time to the city council members. They didn't spend as much time examining them, who they are, where they get their money from, because when it comes to white supremacy, you gotta follow the money. Everyone says the black political class has failed, but that's not true. The black political class is doing exactly what their white paymasters who created them and propped them up have incentivized them to do. The people who white power puts on the ballot and then tells us this is your slate of candidates that you should choose from. We're going to dictate to you who your candidate pool is. These people are part of the controlled opposition that white supremacy uses to keep us in check. That's how you keep a group of people oppressed for the long term. Give them the illusion of choice. Give them the illusion that they can change their circumstances if they use the apparatus set up by their oppressors with operatives that their oppressors put in front of them. And most of the time, people will go for it because it's a hell of a lot easier to try to choose the lesser of two evils as opposed to putting in the hard work necessary to give yourself a good option. As Stokely Carmichael, aka Kwame Ture, said, moral people don't choose the lesser of two evils. Moral people choose a good option. South Fulton was not the result of people on a mission, and as a result, they didn't have a plan for how to sustain themselves or how to make sure that the same anti-black corruption that had plagued them as part of the county wouldn't threaten them once they became their own city. Stephen Kotkin once said that after a revolution, it's not the ideas that carry over, it's the institutions. And he's right. Black people in Fulton County, just like the rest of the country, have no institutions of their own. White power has tons of them, and white power's institutions are what defines not only our oppression, but also how a lot of us see the world and what we think it should be. So after you break away from Atlanta and then break away from Fulton County, what institutions did you have in place to make sure that you had economic and political justice? What institutions were there to make sure that you didn't have some low-down filthy traitors who decided they would act just like the very white supremacists that the people fought to free themselves from? Another huge problem closely related to the first is that most black politicians have never had a real job. They've never actually built anything on their own. Most of them came from the church or some sort of hen-pecking social circle or some other irrelevant setting, and then they wanted to be mayor or council person or etc. Most of them, politics is what they've done most of their lives. Hey, they make a career out of being on the public payroll. It's no accident that as they get term limited in one political office, they immediately run for another. They behave as if their being in office is nothing more than a political scam, because for them, that's exactly what it is. And that's why so many of them are on the take for white power. Fully 95% of black politicians are in the pocket of white power, and everything they do, or rather don't do, is geared toward remaining in the good graces of whatever white newspaper, TV station in their area, or white power brokers who they want support from when they run for higher office. That's the reason so many black politicians do everything they can to stop or to undermine black businesses. I talked about this 15 years ago with We're All Detroiters Now, that most black voters don't have a clue what their interests are and don't know how to pick a political representative who is even qualified to represent those interests. Truth be told, most black voters have been conditioned, largely by white media, but also by bootlicks at the local level, to believe that the barely literate, mumble-mouthed, shuck-and-jive morons who say they want our vote are the model for what a black politician is supposed to be. Not to take away from personal responsibility, but a lot of black people, through white power's media and their influencers at the local level, have been miseducated to accept exactly the kind of people that we shouldn't accept. These bought and paid for traitors will say that they marched in Selma, or they're a member of this or that sorority or fraternity XYZ, or they go to this or that church. And a lot of black folks who are terminally aspirational, they'll go for that. 150 years after the plantations, and we're still more impressed by styling and profiling than we are with someone who has the ability to wheel and deal. As I said in We're All Detroiters Now, most of us fear and even hate knowledge. We don't know what's in our interest, and we resent someone who actually does. We feel that the mumble-mouthed con men who white power props up and presents to us are unthreatening because they're our political candidates, and our meaning, well, they're lesser educated, so they're not threatening to us. When what we need are candidates who are a maximum threat. Look, treason comes in all flavors and sizes. You have black people who have an Ivy League education, and they're as loyal to the black community as a rabid dog. And you have black people with an Ivy League education who, though they are very, very few in number, are actually down for the struggle. Likewise, you have people from the hood who can't wait to sell us out. And you also have others who never would. My point is, get rid of the white media's fantasies and their indoctrination about what it is you should accept from a black leader, along with what they want you to think of as unthreatening. Someone who's just like us when they have nothing in common with us at all. The packaging that a candidate comes in isn't what's important. What's important is whether we are able to discern for ourselves if this person knows what our interests are and will represent those interests aggressively. Are they working for the people or only working for themselves? See, these black misleaders build a power base that is built on black people being willfully ignorant, but also built on white power brokers putting money and media support behind them. You have many of these Negro misleaders who think that unless you're paying them some money, you shouldn't be in business in their city. And as they see it, higher taxes are how they line their own pockets. They saw what the corrupt white politicians did when we were in their cities, and they decided to copy the same scam for themselves because these are mostly two-bit con men and professional BS artists, and we need to be honest about that. The black misleadership class is clearly not our best and brightest. I defy any of you to look at these liars, fakers, frauds, phonies, fools, and tell me that this is the best we can do. Our problem, however, is not that white power keeps sending agents, bootlicks, and sellouts amongst us. Our problem is that we are not selecting and fielding candidates for ourselves. That's how you get a place like Ferguson, where the community is 70% black, but the city council only has 50% black representation. And that means when it comes time to take a vote on issues, well, white power is going to overrule the 70% black population. The people aren't focused on taking power. And in Ferguson in particular, you could take over that entire city for pennies on the dollar. Now, changing this is going to require a substantial and aggressive education campaign at the grassroots. You'd be surprised how many black people feel the same way you do, though if you were in new black media, you probably wouldn't be. A lot of black folks feel exactly the same way that you do about the situation. What they're waiting for is someone who's got the guts to actually say it, to get the ball rolling. But one person is not enough. And one political office, even if it's something like a mayor's office, is not enough. White power has stacked the deck with their operatives. We have to stack the deck with ours. This is war, and there is no such thing as a partial victory. Now, before I go any farther, let me say I'm not a political consultant, though I will give you some very good advice. Successful political campaigns begin at least 2 years before the election. If you only start getting the word out about your candidacy, say in the last 6 months or even within the last year leading up to the election, then you're pretty much already lost. In Sun Tzu's book, The Art of War, the very first chapter deals with strategic assessments, and that's for a reason. You have to take a survey of your enemy, but you also have to do a survey of the terrain that you're going to be waging war in. Find out what your enemy is working with, how many resources he's got, how many men, and whether or not the area you're going to be doing battle in is the best place to be doing it, or where it is that you need to make your stand. Next, you have to summon supporters of your own and get them properly positioned so that when it comes time for you to go to war, all you have to do is execute. I think Sun Tzu said it best: those who are victorious first do what is necessary for victory, then go looking for a fight, whereas the defeated usually went looking for a fight first, hoping to win. Now, this is not going to be a quick and easy process. All of you weak Negroes, you watered-down fools who are always looking for a reason to quit, this ain't for you, okay? As Dr. John Henry Clark said, revolts and revolutions take on average between 10 and 20 years to build steam. Political success won't or shouldn't take 10 to 20 years, but what it will take is persistence. We're not going away. And of course, you will have white supremacist agents, bootlicks, and dusty dudes and hood rats who are terrified of the responsibilities that power will demand. This is what motivates so many of the naysayers and so many of the down-in-the-mouth dissenters amongst us. They're so used to smoking pot full-time or watching TV all day that when you talk about running cities and states, their minds, such as they are, get blown. And it ain't from the weed smoke. Because these are people who are very good for being dependent on white mommy and daddy, but useless for standing on their own 2 feet. They're very interested in watching TV, but not very interested in watching a balance sheet. Trying to actually build something in the real world. They're not good for that. So when you start talking like that, they immediately feel threatened and they got to find a way to stop you. These are the same people who said that the police would never be held to account. Until it started happening. These are the same people who said that reparations would never become a political issue anywhere. Until it did. It's like the kid in school who was too lazy to learn math or to pay attention in history class. So when the conversation turns to mathematics or history, they say it's stupid, when the truth is they're stupid. We cannot let the class clown or the class lazybones define our internal political discourse. We cannot let the weak set the pace for the strong. In the military, they have a saying that the sergeant sets the tone for his men. But when it comes to politics, it's exactly the opposite. It is the foot soldiers who set the tone for the leadership. And if you want political leadership that understands your interests, that's going to depend entirely on whether or not you understand your own. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Rose Arnold, Aisha Sarpong, Naji95, Rufus Reed, and Jerlene Harris. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.